First of all, welcome everybody that is here. Again, thank you for taking the time out of your days, especially Gale and Bryin for being here. Today is opening day. It's November 25th, 2021. I'm Melissa Pache. I'm the CEO of the Whistler Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to acknowledge first that we are having this virtual meeting on the shared unceded territories of the Squamish and Lillooet nations, and we honor their language, their culture, their land and traditions. And I am honored to work and play and live on these lands and enjoy the beauty of the nature that surrounds us. Thank you to all of our members who continue to support the Chamber as we receive through annual membership and commitments enabling us to do the important work that we do to support every one of you every day through webinars such as this. This presentation is being recorded, so you will be able to access it again later. So before we get started, as a reminder, the Chamber is hosting our virtual AGM, followed by a presentation titled Building Back a Strong, Sustainable Business Economy. We're honored and excited to bring to you Honorable Perrin Beatty, President and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. It'll be his first time coming virtually to our community, and it'd be fantastic to see him. Bryin Yu, Deputy Chief Economist at Central One, and Krista Bax, CEO of Go2HR. The conversation is intended to provide you with an understanding of the micro and macro economics and how this will shape our future here in Whistler. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce will provide an update on what they are doing to continue to advocate for labor and the overall health of small business across Canada and what that means for Whistler. Go2HR will provide an update on their labor framework and how this will support moving us and businesses forward. This event is free to our members, and thanks to our presenting partner, the Resort Municipality of Whistler. You'll find a link in the chat room on this call here today, or you can connect with Chanel at chamber@whistlerchamber.com. Oh, and I didn't mention, Bryin Yu, of course, will be providing us with a micro economic overview of locally, provincially, nationally, globally, and how that impacts us as a resort community. That's a big one. So let's not forget that part. With BC slowly recovering now from COVID-19 pandemic, many employers are considering mandating vaccinations among staff. So today we are joined by Gale Kim, Associate of Mackoff Mohamed, and Bryin Munroe, Director of People and Culture at our very own Westin Resort and Spa here in Whistler, to discuss the implications of introducing vaccine policies in the workplace and how they relate to employer and employee rights. You will learn how to outline your vaccine policy properly and understand employer considerations in balancing safety with employee privacy and other legal obligations. So, as the audience is out there and our members are there, of course, most of you I've seen on other webinars, you are welcome to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You'll see it right at the bottom if you scroll down. And please, as we're having a conversation and as our presenters are speaking, feel free to write in your questions there. It would really help us to kick off some questions. I have loads of things to talk about, so we are fully dialed here, So let's get started. We are honored to have with us today Gale. Gale practices in the areas of employment law, civil and commercial litigation, and insurance defense, and has appeared in all levels of court in British Columbia. Before joining Mackoff Mohamed, Gale practiced employment and labor relations law at a national law firm and was a judicial law clerk at the Court of Queen's Bench of Alberta in Edmonton. Gale holds a BFA in film and video production with honors, fantastic, from New York University, and MFA, which you'll have to let us know what that is.
Master of Fine Arts.
Thank you. That's what it is. In experimental animation from California Institute of Arts and Juris Doctor from University of Alberta. You have been a very, very busy lady. And a longtime member of Whistler and local, Bryin Munroe. Upon graduation with a Bachelor of Commerce, Bryin drove across Canada. So you'll have to, where are you from, Bryin?
Sorry, I was muting. Kind of all over. I grew up in a military background, but I was at the University of Manitoba at the time in Winnipeg.
Okay, that's what it is. So you
Yeah.
drove across Canada to join the Fairmont Babs Riggs Hotel, where you spent a few years moving through opportunities, gaining experiences in F&B, front desk, and concierge. I was a concierge. I was like,
So much fun.
my door. I know. I love
Yeah.
that. That was my favorite job.
Me too.
No,
Me too.
sorry, this is my favorite job. The Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge was searching for HR coordinator to support a maternity leave, and that opportunity kicked you off into the hospitality human resources career profession. So Bryin has now worked in various roles in HR over the past 20 years and has landed himself at the Westin here in Whistler. So welcome, Gale and Bryin. So to kick us off this morning in our conversation, a very, very long-awaited conversation for our community, I want to pass it over to you, Gale, to give us a little update first, and then we'll pass it to Bryin, and then we'll jump into Q&A. So Gale, over to you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And thank you, Chanel, in the background, and for the Whistler Chamber for inviting me to talk today. So I'm happy to, discuss about, vaccines in the workplace, which is new legal territory, and definitely something that everyone should be concerned about. I've been contacted by business owners and employees alike saying what to do about the vaccine situation. Specifically, they've wanted to know, can a business implement a vaccine mandate? And if so, what are everyone's rights? And my general answer to these questions have been, well, first of all, an employee does have a right to refuse the vaccine. But second of all, the employer has a right to maintain a safe work environment and ensure the health and safety of their workers, their customers, their clients. So I suppose in this situation, we need to kind of balance everyone's interests. So what happens when an employee refuses? First of all, the employer needs to find out, is there a legitimate basis for this refusal? This is a question of whether the employee has a rightful or legitimate claim under the Human Rights Code saying, I would be discriminated under the Human Rights Code if you don't find a solution or accommodate me. And so the most common ground of discrimination would be disability. So they would claim that, due to their health or their disability, they need to be accommodated, and the employer shouldn't refuse to have them in the workplace. And so in the context of a vaccine, what would a legitimate claim, to refuse look like? One example would be an allergy concern. Another one would be if the employee is afflicted with some kind of long-term health condition, maybe an immunity-related disorder that says, that prevents them from getting the vaccine. Another situation would be if they are inflicted with some temporary medical condition that's time limited, and they said, we can't get the vaccine right now, but maybe we can explore this at another time. So if that happens, it's up to the employer to ask for evidence for this exemption. And what that means is asking for a medical note. Typically, this doesn't mean that you can pry into their medical history or their personal information. This means, can you get a doctor's note that sets out the bare bones, this patient needs an exemption, for this period or due to this reason. So it's basically you're asking for the bare minimum information in order to justify an accommodation or an exception to this employee. Now, what do you do if an employee says the vaccine is dangerous and experimental? I still think the COVID-19 virus is a hoax. That's not a protected ground under the Human Rights Code. And so at that point, the employer needs to decide what should we do about the situation, because they're not legally protected under the Human Rights Code. Now, I realize that, there is a worker shortage in BC. And so it's not always feasible to say, if you're not going to get the vaccine, then we're going to terminate you without cause, as in give you your severance and send you on your way. That's not always feasible. And a few options that some businesses have been able to come up with, if, for example, you're dealing with an office space, which I understand maybe not everyone does, is it possible to let this one employee work remotely and get the job done? That's one option. Another option would be to implement very clear guidelines on how people move around and interact in the workspace, and maybe, using PPE, for example. That's another option. And then a slightly more invasive action that I can think of is having regular rapid COVID-19 tests. So that way you can ensure that people coming in have, a negative status in terms of the virus. And so ultimately it's up to the employer to determine if a mandatory vaccine policy is appropriate, and it's up to the employer to determine how to keep everyone safe, employees, customers, and clients. And so that's my little presentation, and I think it probably moves nicely into what Bryin has to share today.
Does. Thank you, Gale. You brought up a really good point that we've been talking about and advocating for is the testing kits, and we will be sharing information about Safe Screen BC. We were hoping to have more information where it would involve the chamber, but at this point, I will put up a link to Safe Screen BC here for everybody to use, and it's organized in partnership with the Ministry of Health and the Provincial Health Services Authority. Safe Screen BC will guide businesses through the required application process for provincially available test kits. So we'll send that out to our members so that you have an opportunity to have test kits in place, and we will keep you updated on how we might be able to support having the test kits locally. So until then, we'll provide that information for you. So thanks for bringing that up, Gale. That's important. With that said, Bryin, what has your experience been at the Westin with onboarding and existing staff around this issue?
Absolutely. Happy to talk about that. I do want to say, good morning. What a beautiful picture perfect opening day, and just reminding everyone we are a proud member of the chamber at our property, and I'm gonna just throw it out there again, get on that AGM, like to go to HR and those resources. That's gonna be really exciting. At the Westin, we did take the liberty and we went to a fully vaccination policy. We worked with legal teams to make sure that would meet all the requirements. It is a conscious decision, and we turn back and think it was the right thing to do, and we're very proud of what we did. When you think back over the last couple of years and how the legal landscape, as business owners, it's almost daily, we got to stay on top of what's coming out and how things are changing from at the beginning, not even asking what someone's status was, to now able to do so. But how do you store that if you do store that information, and how do you protect that? No different than gathering a social insurance number or legal authorization to work in Canada. So we did go with that. I think the big critical piece is the policy, because you're setting the landscape for your business, and that's important. And we did one for all. So we took into consideration, we were a little early on, but we looked at current employees as well as the employees we were interviewing to come to Whistler. We started interviewing back in April for the people who are just joining us now. And so the challenge was probably more the current employee base, but we were lucky. There was a lot of employees that were forthwith giving the information. I think of, the restaurant, they went over to the vaccine clinic together and posted pictures, and but that's not everyone. But we really try to think what's the right thing to do, and really, as Gale said, we have to maintain a safe work environment. You have to consider in a hotel environment, there are, people in the kitchen working arm in arm, side to side. They're welcoming new people. We're going to be training and be very close. And what do we do for breaks, and how do people sit and take their meal together, and who wears a mask and who doesn't? So we wanted to be consistent and do that. And so we certainly did do that, and we took into light, what would the risk to the business be if we did not do that, and we wanted to make sure that was important. So we're quite proud of that. It's a lengthy policy, and it's a lot to cover, going into, as Gale said, what accommodations are required, and that's a key. Do you have an employee who requires an accommodation for many of the things that Gale mentioned, and looking at that? Once you sit down and have personal conversations, talking with many colleagues at all different businesses, what we've heard is, trying to get to that root. Often it's just a personal belief and having that conversation. And those are the more difficult ones because it's not religious, it's not, medical, it's just, I went and got my eyes checked a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking to the eye doctor who was a 2-person practice who now is 1 because the other physician said he believes in it, but not for himself. And so, that's how we've been working with it. And it's been to our success. We now are over 200 employees and we're a fully vaccinated, very happy workforce. And it creates a good camaraderie and people to know that and to be able to, do that training we're doing and sit down and take our lunch breaks together. And we've been very fortunate.
Thank you, Bryin. That's great, especially because I think where I'm hearing it on the ground, it's the small businesses that really struggle with number one, trying to find the information, write the policy that suits their environment. And so one of the things that we're going to be asking for the larger businesses, if they have policies or parts of policies that they want to share, to send them to us, and then we can share that out, because that's the biggest thing, is that peer-to-peer learning and that peer-to-peer sharing intel. So I'm not going to put you on the spot because I know a lot of it's legal ramifications, but if that's something that you can share, we will be sending out an email after this with some information. And if that's something that can be shared so that those resources are easily accessible to those members that are just like flat out, that would be really helpful for sure. So thank you. So I'm going to roll into some questions. And again, I see something here. Hang on a second. I'm going to try and see that. Are there any emerging? So actually, I'm going to ask the group on the call to please use the Q&A for questions, because that's the one I'm actually watching. But for this one, Allison's asking, are there any emerging tribunal decisions or cases, case law re-mandatory vaccines yet? Maybe Gale, that would be definitely,
yep.
Of course.
Still too early. It takes quite a few, it takes 6 months to a year before there is an actual decision. So I'm not aware of any tribunal decisions that have ruled on it, but I'm keeping an eye on it for sure.
Right.
Still new legal territory.
I bet. There's another question. Are religious reasons protected by law?
Religious beliefs, that is a protected ground. However, it's not necessarily linked to science, right? So, a rejection of science is not a religious belief. So, right. To this date, I don't think that's a reason to, a protected ground to refuse the vaccine.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, thank you. Is this a separate policy or one embedded in your So I guess, Bryin, this is to you. The policy that you have, is it separate policy or one embedded in your HR policies and procedures handbook?
It is a separate policy because, as you all know, it's evolving all the time. And so one thing we definitely made sure was that as things change, we would be changing that policy, making sure it's updated regularly.
Yeah, the ebb and flow of COVID. It's just so lovely.
Yeah,
everything is temporary.
Yeah.
So we'll get into some other questions that I've prepared for you today, and I'll keep an eye on the Q&A as well. So, and some of this we may have covered, but I'll reiterate it. Why is the vaccine card for customers and not for workers?
Well, my understanding is that it was implemented so that people can feel safe going into these businesses. And so it's really about, these people going to restaurants, people going to retail establishments, so they can feel safe. In the end, the BC Human Rights Commissioner has said that proof of vaccination requirement is justified from a human rights perspective to protect those who are vulnerable. So I think in the end, the card is mainly to keep the businesses safe, but it's not something that is mandated, for employees themselves for now.
Yeah, for now, that's it. Because that's been a big issue, especially in particular in the restaurant industry, where some the staff are not mandated, but in some cases, and yet the customers have to show proof. So that's where that question is really important for our members to understand what that actually looks like, and certainly for the staff to understand it as well. It's a tough one. It's not an easy thing to manage at this point.
I think, Melissa, too.
Go ahead, Bryin. No, go ahead.
I think in the workplace, what we also need to make sure is that we continually monitor what our current practices are to support if we don't ask for that, but making sure we're still doing social distancing and mask wearing and hand washing, all those things to stop any spread of anything, the communicable disease program. And I think that will help in why maybe we don't currently ask for that. As long as those are in place, we should be in good shape.
Yeah, and I think it's just a reminder that the pandemic's not over, and there are some, and I see that a lot when I'm out and about, is people relaxing a little bit, and I think that's where sort of reminding everybody that it's not over, and we do have to take care and increase that safety around us. Another question is, does a privately owned company have the legal right to mandate its staff to show proof of vaccination?
I think that's more industry specific. So, in something that is that requires close contact, like I can imagine like a place where they give facials, for example, like that one would probably be a very appropriate place to mandate it. So it's really dependent on the business. Like, are they willing to implement a policy? Is it necessary to implement the policy, and how far will they go to do it?
Right.
That's
great. Yeah. Any comments on that, Bryan, on your end as a hotel?
I think partnering with WorkSafe BC, you'll see where in any business you can do a risk analysis. You can do that with a couple of employees, and that will help in guide that decision. What's the risk of something happening, and you can analyze that, and that's really helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense. Jordan from Whistler Mechanical, as a customer, is it legal to ask our servers or service technicians if they are vaccinated?
I don't think it wouldn't be illegal. But I think the server has the right to refuse to answer if they, didn't want to. But there is no guidance on that particular issue. If the customer is not comfortable, then they don't really have to be there, right?
Right.
I think if he's asking in reference to an employee, it would come down to what policy they have. Is that right, Gale?
Well, if there is a policy in place, yes.
Right. Yeah.
I guess that's what the mandate is, whether it's in policy or not.
Yeah.
That makes sense. For a small organization, the legal fees for consultation on creating a sound vaccine policy are costly. Does anyone on the call or the presenters know of resources of legal advice that are free to the public? I think Go to HR. I'll look into that. Thank you, Julie, for bringing that up. Go to HR is specific to tourism and hospitality. And as I said, to Go to HR is going to be at the AGM. Our entire community is based on tourism, whether or not they're in the mechanical like Jordan is, or they're all basically creating their businesses around how many people are staying in the hotel. So I'd say everybody's that way. So I think Go to HR will probably have something that I can dig up, and maybe Chanel, just note that. Chanel's in the background taking notes, but maybe take a note on that, and I'll see if we can get that out there. But over to our panelists, is that something that you have any knowledge of?
Yes, I think WorkSafe BC actually has a lot of information that's very helpful. They even, set out like what factors need to be considered when implementing a policy. And they also talk about, the kind of the rights of employers and employees as well. So I think WorkSafe BC has a lot of good information. And probably the BC Human Rights Commissioner website also has information about that as well.
Okay, so we'll dig up that information and links, and we'll add those to the resources that we'll send out for sure. Thank you. And then curious, Bryan, if you're turning away a lot of suitable applicants that are you turning away a lot of suitable applicants that aren't vaccinated, wondering about the impact on the recruitment process? That's a great question. Thanks, Allison.
Yeah, really, really good question. I would say maybe early on when we started to launch and go with this, the foreign workforce that's coming back, we're definitely seeing more from the UK than we have in Australia, even, Germany, Ireland. That workforce is, they want to travel, and to travel, you need to be vaccinated. And the advantage is, I think last year, the people who came to us, we were paying to help them quarantine. So that was all omitted now. And we found, yeah, definitely 9.9 out of 10 candidates had their hand up and said, like, we didn't even ask. Fully vaccinated, ready to get on a plane, ready to come to Canada. And then same with our workforce from across Canada, you know, from Newfoundland, Ontario, Alberta in here. I can only speak on the one property, but we've not had, you know, out of maybe 500 people we interviewed, there might be 2 people that had a challenge with it.
Right. Great.
Yeah.
That was a great question, actually, because it's something that with the labor shortage that we have, it's been tough. And I'm sure a lot of the people on the call today are wondering how you recruited and fully staffed yourself. So that's coming out next week on December 1st.
Well, we're not fully staffed
No,
by
I'm
any
sure
means. You know, we still want more, but we are feeling very grateful for where we're at, but there's still definitely more room. Yeah.
Another question from our members is, speaking of safety, how does it relate to employee the vaccine being mandatory for them but not the guests? So we did talk a little bit about that just a few minutes ago, but maybe just to reiterate, how does it work where, again, the employee doesn't need to be vaccinated necessarily, sure proof, but the customers do? And I think you mentioned that, Gale, about having it in policy versus not.
Right. So, I mean, in the end, people come and go from businesses because they, you know, feel the freedom to do that, and they need to feel safe to do that. So it's really, you know, whether or not there's a policy in place that requires the employee to be vaccinated. And it's the government that's requiring that, you know, these establishments like restaurants and whatnot to have the customers vaccinated, but the government's not requiring the employees to do so. So it's within the discretion of the business based on what the needs are, what the contact is, what the risks are. So there's no clear guideline, but I think common sense probably dictates a lot of it.
Yeah. Is it on that same note, if an employee is unvaccinated, in Bryan's case, that's not going to happen because you're fully vaccinated. But in general, can businesses require them to take a test in order to enter the workplace?
If that's
what testing is available,
yeah,
right? So
yes,
yeah,
it's certainly within the right of the employer to do that because you know, they want to make sure there's a safe work environment. So I'm sure that they do that all the time in, say, like the movie industry.
right.
That must be going on all the time, right? Because people are, you know, they're like 2 inches away from each other and, like, you know, speaking their lines and whatnot. So yeah, so again, like, it's like, you know, what's reasonable and, you know, what makes sense in your kind of workplace.
And again, having that in a policy so that if a staff member refuses, then it goes against policy, then they have a legal right to then move forward with a different strategy for that person, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. That makes good sense.
I will say I'm aware there definitely are employers in tourism that are doing the rapid testing. And that's been something that they've done to maybe not go towards a mandatory vaccine. So because maybe it's only a piece of their business where they're that close. And I think on the last question too, I just wanted to add, I think in ensuring that your employees are safe, whether it be, you know, you see barriers now at cash desks and customer service desks, asking your guests to wear a mask. And if they don't have a mask, have masks for them. Keeping up your social distancing signs and the footprints on the stores, that will definitely also give a great protection to employees when they're saying, hey, our customer may not be social distancing. I know the hotel world, the way we clean rooms now, we don't go in a room if a guest is there anymore. We wait longer amounts of time, and we've added new products. So making sure that you're being on the cutting edge of what's safe for your employee.
And Bryan, I'm going to ask you this question because you're in front of the public and you have guests, obviously you have guests coming in. There was a concern from one of our members, and we've been trying to work this through with them, is in one of their locations, they're seeing more and more people wanting to get in there without their masks on. And, you know, it's really tough because the burden is put on the staff and they're not equipped to deal with this. I mean, they don't want to deal with this stuff. What do you do when somebody comes into your work to the hotel and just absolutely refuses? Is that been an issue? And if it has, what have you done? Or have you set something up as a policy or words that they can speak to these guests? Like what can somebody do?
It's a good point. We do a lot of training. I was telling you about one we do with Respect for All. And so, we do try to give the tools to our employees on how to handle that situation. And, although we are seeing maybe a little bit more empathy, there are still people who are quite passionate about that. Even having a mask available to hand to someone, if they continue to refuse that, we never want our employee to feel uncomfortable, then that's going to be the case. And chances are that one guest is going to walk somewhere else and another guest is going to get in the elevator and say, hey, where's your mask? Yeah. So there's no sense in us taking on the additional stress. We do our best to say, we do wear a mask here if you have one. If not, I have one for you. People usually are very quick to put it on.
It's interesting. Oh, sorry, go right ahead. Gale.
Yeah, I just want to, this is just from an observation perspective because, I walk into establishments and community centers and whatnot. So I've just noticed more security people. So that's like another option, of course, a more costly option, but, you would expect that security people would be better equipped to enforce policies and make sure that people are following the rules.
Yeah, and unfortunately for the reality behind, love the idea, and that's great for bigger businesses that can afford to do that, but the smaller businesses that can't, right. It's really tough. So we're working through a few different things, and that's what that peer-to-peer, working with the bigger organizations to really understand what are you doing, how are you setting this up, is going to be, it's critical to the survival of all of the, not just the survival, but the health and the wellness of our community. It's critical. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately for this particular situation, it's more our locals that are being refusing, not the visitor. So it's a bit of a tough game to play for them. So we'll continue to support them in finding solutions for sure. Does the employer need to provide extra PPE in order for their worker to come into their business?
I would say that if it is the employer's responsibility to provide that, within reason, right? Not like a hazmat suit, but gloves and masks and whatnot, if appropriate, the appropriate barriers. So I would say, WorkSafe BC would say that it is appropriate for the employer to provide that where possible, within reason. Obviously, cost is a concern. So. And then actually, I was wondering about the rapid testing. I think I saw that they're actually free from the government. Is that correct? That's my understanding.
I'm not sure. We're just looking into that right now.
I think businesses can apply for free online.
Yeah, what they do, I'll check. I won't say too much because we're just getting involved. I won't say too much because we're waiting for the government to announce something for the chambers to support, but that hasn't happened. So right now, I believe that it may be, and then the cost is on the delivery of the couriering, that's where the cost comes in. So we're hoping to get these kits at the chamber. That's the whole point, but I don't want to get the cat out of the bag just yet.
Well, that's a good plan. That's a really good plan.
So we'll see how that happens. It's up to the government now to manage that, and let us know that we can, but we'll stay there for now. What was I just saying? Bryin, I don't know if you were going to say something on this last question.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. We do definitely utilize WorkSafe BC. Having a health and safety committee helps that. And we were one of the brands that were first to go with the face mask, face shield. And as you all know, it went from 1-ply to 2-ply to 3-ply. And so we do provide that. It's not necessary, but we're happy to do that and encourage people to wash them. So everybody, gets 5 cloth type masks. We use a local Canadian partner to deliver those, and the more you're buying, the more inexpensive it gets. So giving that tool out has been helpful. And we went with electrostatic sprayers, which is very costly, and I can imagine that's not hard to do. That's hard to do, but just having spray bottles around to wipe things more often and things like that.
That makes sense for sure. If a contractor is doing work at another business, can the business require the contractor to show proof of vaccination?
I would say that, yes, go ahead.
Well, I'd actually rather you go, but I can say part of our policy is that if a contractor is going to be spending any length of time, so if we're going to hire an electrician to come into the hotel for 4 days, the company that we're using that is our vaccination policy. But if someone is with FedEx and dropping things off, or they're in and out quickly, or deliveries, not so much. But if there's anything more than a 6-hour time in the hotel, then that is a contractor requirement.
Yes. So yeah, I was just going to say, like, if it's up to the business, like if that is in their policy, they can certainly enforce it. I've talked to a person who works as a plumber for commercial buildings, and he would obviously enter these buildings as a contractor, and the landlord there required everyone to be vaccinated. So it's entirely within their right to mandate, like, anyone who comes into this building must be vaccinated. So yeah, it can be done.
That's great. If you're not mandating your current employees to be double vaccinated, can you put it in as a requirement to new employees in their employment contract?
Do you want to go ahead, Bryin, or?
No, I was just saying that's
Okay.
a really good question.
I know.
Yes. The answer is yes, because this is before the relationship is formed, and everything is up for negotiation. So that is absolutely a term that you can put in there, and if they don't want to take the job, then they can walk away.
And Bryin, you had a comment as well?
No, I was just saying it was a great question. I guess, Gale, am I correct that it's almost, when it's a new person, it's like a condition of employment. We require people to hold authorization to work in Canada. We can't pay you or work if you don't have a social insurance. And now we require you to be fully vaccinated. Is that a safe way to go as we recruit new hires?
Yes, that absolutely is. Like, it makes complete sense. Like, you have certain qualifications, you have certain requirements that need to be met, and they're all set out in the employment contract. So that's the time to set it out and say, if you want to work here, you need to be vaccinated.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like it really comes down to that policy. It comes down to what we write in the policies, and then have the policy hold up what we need to have done in the business.
And for the beginning of an employment contract, like, or relationship, what's written in the contract itself too, because that can dictate everything as well.
Any questions from the audience at this point, from our members? We are going to slowly close this out unless I see any more questions come up. This has been a great conversation. I mean, it's just been, to have both of you here from totally different perspectives, but at the same time aligned. Looks like, Bryin, you at the Westin did some incredible research, and in terms of what you had to do. And again, if you can share that policy with us, that would be really fantastic. I think that whole template idea. And then from what I hear on this call, Gale, is that we can take that template and then adjust it to what we need it to look like for our own businesses. And I think that's really important message to make sure that businesses understand that one policy could look very different to another. Is that what I'm hearing from it? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Because every business is different, right? In terms of employee numbers and how they interact with each other. So I would say each policy would be custom.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's great. What we will do is, there's one question. Hold on a sec. Do our policies have to be approved? Great question, Jordan. She's asking, do our policies have to be approved or looked over by a lawyer or something of legal authority or entity?
I guess that's more of a call to be made by the employer. It's definitely recommended because you want to make sure that you are in compliance with the Human Rights Code. You want to make sure that you're not going to run into trouble with like WCB if something happens. So those are just concerns because not all businesses know about their right or their obligation to accommodate and within reason. So it's always good to get a consultation. It doesn't have to be a lengthy one. There are plenty of employment lawyers, including myself, who are able to give these kind of consultations. At least you can get guidance on how to craft your policy, not necessarily like hire someone to draft it, which obviously would be a different expense.
Sounds like another webinar to me. How to craft the policy, right?
That's true.
No, we'll talk.
Yes.
Good one. But I would say that, I mean, we're a business, we're non-for-profit membership-based organization, but we're a business. And so I always look at these things where it might be costly up front, but it's certainly less costly than what could possibly happen in the back end. And that's really safeguarding your business against any further financial implications going down the road. So
Yes, it's kind of like insurance.
it is, isn't it? Yeah. Any last comments from either one of you? Bryan, I don't know if you wanted to make any comments before we close out, and then I'll pass it to Gale.
I think just sharing that it is maybe a difficult decision, but if it's the right thing to do for your business, consider that. We looked at a lot of angles, even all the other large, the big banks, everyone else launching the policy, Whistler Blackcomb going with that on an employee base. Air Canada wrote a letter out saying, hey, we're a Canadian employer, we're requesting this. I think the more people that do that, it's easier for them versus someone having to say, well, then I'll just go to someone else who doesn't. But that's what I would leave with. Okay,
thank you, Bryan. Gale, over to you.
I would just say that, it's important to, well, I guess every business owner knows, to look at the big picture and look at the long term and figure out what's right for your business. And it doesn't hurt to get extra protection up front in order to ensure that, everything is in compliance and things run smoothly. And, together we'll get through this.
Thank you so much, both of you, for being here today. This was an incredibly informative conversation for myself, and I'm sure for the members that are out there. Jordan is just writing some info. That was great, very informative. Thank you for taking the time and knowledge. Thank you, Jordan, for all your questions as well, and everybody else that's on the call. Appreciate your time. Our team will be sending out an email to everyone on this call today within the next 24 hours with resources, the recording of this webinar, and contact information. I will work with both of you on two different ways. One, Bryan will chat about resourcing and seeing what we can do to get that information out. And Gale, I think maybe there's something else we could be doing in the short term in terms of helping businesses write what that policy looks like. So let's chat offline. Remember that to join us on December 1st, it is free. And we really want you to be there. Everybody's been asking about labor and wanting some information. This is the time to do it. It's December 1st, 10 a.m. to 10:30 is our AGM. Join us for that. That'll be immediately followed from 10:30 to 12 o'clock with our panelists. So fantastic, informative couple of hours. And at this point, we will continue to stay connected with all of you through our regular e-news updates, and which generally will happen Mondays and sometimes spread through the week. And we'll be hosting more of these webinars to navigate you through recovery. What we're doing is we're not theming these particular webinars ahead of time. We wait to see what's happening on the ground, and we create the webinar based on what our members' needs are. So every quarter you'll see this, or as needed. So thank you again, everybody, for being here. Have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.